Jackie Strauss with The Hollywood Reporter, and this is Closer Look, The Looming Tower. And I'm here with Peter Sarsgaard, Jeff Daniels, Wrenn Schmidt, Tahar Rahim, Lawrence Wright, and Dan Futterman. Jeff, you play John O'Neill, who is the man associated with Osama bin Laden, yet many people watching won't know anything about. So in researching him and playing him, why is he a perfect vessel to tell this story?
He's almost a common man. He's of the street. He's the way in. And because everyone knows what happened, you know, in hindsight, you get to go back and see somebody, and there were others, who were screaming about bin Laden before bin Laden became bin Laden and before 9/11 happened. In a lot of ways, I'm the perfect audience for this because I read. Not as much as Peter, but I do read.
I'm the brains in this.
He is the brains. He is. And but I was unaware of Larry's book, and I didn't know who John O'Neill was. And yet you think you know 9/11. So it's fascinating for anyone to look back at American history, which really is what 9/11 is now, and see how, at a time when we truly did have the best and the brightest, all the way to the top, regardless of political party, every department was fully staffed, and yet we were that divided.
Right.
We had brilliant, knowledgeable, experienced, competent people in government, and 9/11 happened. What's different? Take out brilliant, take out knowledgeable, take out competent, and take out experienced. How we doing? Not too good.
I mean, to all of you in the cast, when you read Lawrence's book, did you have similar reactions when you're reliving that road and thinking about the current climate?
I was like, how are they going to do this?
I mean, I remember when I read it when it first came out, and a lot of what I experienced right after 9/11, a lot of the films and stuff were, raising the flag. It wasn't like a time to be critical. It's like after someone has passed away, you don't talk about their drug addiction and maybe why or how. And actually, I remember my wife at the time was interviewed on the red carpet by the guy with the eyebrows, from New York One. And I remember her saying something like, maybe enough time has passed that we can start to think about the ways in which we might have been responsible. And it was like a bomb went off. And actually, we left the country and went to the Osa Peninsula, in Costa Rica, where there were no telephones, and stayed down there for like 3 weeks. And when we came back, people were yelling at my wife out of cars.
Wow.
And because in the aftermath of something like that, people are not ready to think critically at all. And it's understandable. It's a time of grieving. But when the book came around, I think it was 2007, something like that?
2006, yeah.
2006. So it was like the first time I had read something where it was getting into the how and why and in what ways we were responsible, something that we might have been able to prevent,
Yeah. Wrenn, do you have an answer as well?
Well, I feel like when 9/11 happened, I was in college, and I was kind of trying to figure out what America's place was in the larger world. And I feel like after 9/11, there was a point at which I started to ask the question of, well, what does it mean to be the good guys? Because that's what I've been taught growing up. But I feel like I don't yet really understand what America's impact is on the world. And we've done some great things, and we've done some not so great things. And I feel like really trying to struggle with that question of what does it mean to be the good guys, and are we the good guys, is something that Larry's book helps you do, because you start to understand that bin Laden and his ilk were not reacting to our culture. They were reacting to very specific things that were happening. So I feel like it turned so many things on their heads as far as my understanding of what was happening. And I also feel like I really started to understand that the strands of history that have been woven together for something like 9/11 to be possible go back way further than I ever understood. I mean, I can't do justice to his name.
Said Qutb?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I mean, like really understanding that, you know, there was a real wrestling with what Islam was in universities in the Middle East, like the University
wanting
of
to
Cairo.
change it in their
and-
own countries.
Right.
Yeah.
That the first goal was to, you know, the revolution was within. It was
Right.
it was about them. It wasn't about us.
Yeah.
You know, that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's really like the question that I feel like I was asking after 9/11, and then again when I started reading Larry's book was like, what, why and how and who are we and what are we doing that? I mean, how does America impact the world? I feel like you said it better the other day. You know, that when you're here, it's so different from being in another country where America's kind of always on the horizon.
Right.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, that when you're abroad, America looms so large, and yet inside of America, the world doesn't loom that way. You know, we're isolated, and unfortunately, we have an idea that we can go out and change cultures that we don't know anything about, wage war inside them, without any clear objective, and that's gotten us in trouble again and again, and there is blowback. I'm not saying 9/11 is our fault. It's not. But, there are consequences to our behavior in the rest of the world.
Tahar, Ali was the only Arabic-speaking agent in the FBI New York Bureau. What does that say about the United States at the time?
I think it says that how they didn't took the threat seriously at this time. There were a lot of people, them in the show, who were really aware about the danger, and they tried to fight for that. So, I think they were not really taking this situation seriously. And plus, there was this Monica Lewinsky situation, so they were focused on something different. And I was surprised, but as John said, I was not aware about all of this. So when I read the script, I discovered what happened before 9/11. And when I read your book, I really learned a lot of things about where all of this has started. And it was really interesting to know how all this thing has started and where we are today. Horrifying as well.
Well, the Bureau and to a large extent the agency were still fighting the Cold War, which is over. But their skill sets, there are lots of people I met in both of those agencies who spoke Russian or Eastern European languages were appropriate for the Cold War. But the Cold War had ended, and they weren't prepared for this latest chapter, this latest challenge.
Over the years, you've gotten a lot of offers to adapt this for the screen. Why was this a yes?
Well, there were two things going on. One was, I was reluctant to trust it to another form, another mentality. But two things happened. One was that television changed. My reluctance was in part, I just didn't see another medium that could accommodate the story at the scale that it needed, and with the subtlety and intelligence that I wanted to see it take form. And but over those years, television has grown up and become more sophisticated, more commodious, so that there are actors and directors and writers that we could work with now that simply it would be impossible 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And the other thing is I began to realize there were so many young people for whom 9/11 was not a part of their life experience. And they didn't know why they were living in the country that they are. They didn't know the America that existed before 9/11. And they didn't know why we failed. And so I thought it was important to create a narrative in a new form that would reach those people.
And to Dan, what were some of the challenges when you go about adapting a book like this and turning it into 10 episodes of TV?
Well, this is something that Larry and and Alex, Gibby, and I talked about a lot. It's first of all, is where to start. Larry has a whole first 100 pages about Qutb, right?
Said Qutb, yeah.
Yeah, and the sort of evolution of Islamic radicalism that we didn't do.
And then there was a thought maybe we would start with the capture of Ramzi Youssef in 1995. That was when John O'Neill came to the FBI. And then we batted all these things around. Where do you start? The spring and summer of 1998 seemed like the right place. It was where Ali Soufan sort of started at the FBI. It's where a first conflict over information between the FBI and the CIA happened, and then the embassy bombings. So you gotta peel away stuff. You have to conflate events, you have to conflate characters, and we discussed and wrestled over all of it.
What kind of liberties did you take when you start creating these characters and you working with the timeline?
Well, I wrote some songs, and we decided not to do those. But look, most of it is, as I said, it's what to drop and what to mush together into. For instance, we have testimony. We start off with very, very quickly in the first episode, we have testimony. That's kind of a mashup of the 9/11 Commission and the Joint Congressional Inquiry. We have characters who are combinations of several different people. Those are the challenges and decisions that need to get made.
And you're tracking of 4 years leading up to 9/11 in the show. I mean, you mentioned the younger generations especially. What message do you hope to convey, whether people lived through 9/11 or not, with the show?
One of the themes of this show is divided we fail. And what we're showing in this is that these are two important intelligence agencies in America, the FBI and the CIA. And they were at odds and personally antagonistic toward each other. And because of that, they failed to cooperate. Had they cooperated with each other, 9/11 might have been prevented. Well, that was the consequence of being divided. And we're more divided now than any time in modern American history. And the consequences we have yet to know. But we've already learned one lesson. It was a miserable experience to have 9/11 happen. It's a trauma this country has still not recovered from. And we don't know what might come in the future, but we know that disunion is dangerous for us.
To the cast, how did you guys prepare, research for your roles, and what CIA and FBI former agents were available to you guys?
We talked to the same person. Didn't
Yeah, we talked to a field officer
Yeah.
who I think she'd been in the CIA for 25 years. She started the day that Reagan was sworn in. And I feel like she was just kind of a wealth of information as far as filling in the gaps, because they are such a tough bunch. I feel like, as far as to feel like you can grasp like what that culture and that agency is like. We both read The Looming Tower. Did you read Steve's book too?
No, I read this book, Legacy of Ashes.
Oh, yeah, Tim Winter.
And I'd read Legacy of Ashes for another project, Wormwood, that was CIA related as well. So I had, it's the thing with the CIA, it seems to me, is that from the time of Pearl Harbor, which is kind of, we went, how the hell did that happen? We should have had people that knew how that happened, and that's kind of how it developed. To now, it has changed so many times in so many different ways that, like, it's really a matter of, like, what is the CIA right now, or what was the CIA then? It's always adapting and changing, I think.
Does it make sense to you why certain mistakes were made when you learn more about the CIA and when you understand their goals?
Yeah, well, in terms of the conflict between the CIA and the FBI, they have different goals, and they are not always...
And different methods.
Yeah.
They both thought they were right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's trying to be, no one is treasonous here. No one's like, I want to bring down the United States of America. They all are patriots, one way or another.
And Jeff, how were you able to piece John together?
I had a lot of help from his partners who had been with him for years and years, here and overseas, and they were like an open book. The good and the bad, the strengths, the weaknesses. Ali Soufan himself was helpful. The book, Larry's book, was helpful. I had enough out of all of that. That's a lot, you know, that's a lot going in.
So much of what an actor does, though, is just on the day and the moment. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, people are always wondering what our research is and stuff like that. I mean, it's really for these guys. You know, in the end, we take the script and we go, okay, this is what it is. And it's about the relationships. What's my relationship with this person? What's my relationship with that person? And that defines character as much as your funny glasses and whatever you know? Like who you are is who you are in relationship to someone else.
Or how do I relate to what this person is doing, how they're choosing to do something? I mean, my character, and I think it's fair to say your character, there's some things that they do where like, I might not understand why she's doing that. You know, I think you mentioned that the other day. But at the same time, like the fun is, for me, is to give over to that and to do those things and say those words.
Well, yeah, sometimes I would pick up the script and be like, how the hell am I going to say that? How do I say that? And then you're just like, okay, find a way. That's kind of the nice part of it.
Well, and it's especially interesting that there were so many women in the Alex station. So what was it like to be a female agent at that time?
They don't say agent.
Operative?
Officer.
Officer.
I feel like I can't say because I wasn't there. I feel like I was trying to really wrap my head around a person who's doing a job that she's committed to and strongly believes in her mission. And maybe fancies herself a little bit of a cowboy, you know, or that she has that in her, that she might want to be more operational and who is passionate about her work.
And how do you think Ali will feel as he's watching the show? I know he's very involved.
I think he's happy, right?
Yeah, he's happy.
He's thrilled.
Yeah, he's very happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things he would have done differently, but he was involved. He's a producer on the show. He was involved all the way through. He read every script.
Well, he's the one that persuaded Tahar to do this part.
Yeah, what did he say to you? Do you remember?
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah, I remember I had we talked for the first time on Skype, and my agent here is named Ali. So I take time to say yes because I need to think, you know, actors questions. And I said, okay, I'm going to call Ali. And they're, okay, we can set up a Skype call. But I got his number. and they were talking about Elias Soufan. So I said yes. And when we talked, he started to tell me what happened after the first episodes that I read. Even if they said it, he helped me to get involved in this show because of what he did and why a young man like this wants to do that, to work to make the world a better place. It's to me, it's great. When I was 27, I was outside having dinner, going out with my friends. I was not thinking about what was really happening all over the world, and the fact that he fought for freedom and as a Muslim American FBI agent was really, I think it was brand new to me. And it's important to tell that story.
He is a hero in this story, and
He's a hero in real life.
Yeah.
An American hero is what Ali Soufan is, yeah.
what does it feel like, I guess, to all of you to be bringing this story out of the shadows, and especially in this current climate? Why is it so important?
I guess I want people to look at this show and say, look at what might have happened. We might have been able to prevent this tragedy had we all been working together. I think America, seen through the eyes of Ali Soufan, for instance, who grew up in Beirut during the Civil War, he sees what it's like to lose your country, and he's come to this country, and if we see through his eyes, how valuable this precious country is, and how unusual it is, not just in our time, but in history. And we have to fight all the time to preserve it. And I think, it's the disunion, the discord that has been such a pernicious problem for us. And it was a problem at 9/11, it's a problem now.
I want to finish. You tell me if I'm wrong about this, but Ali Soufan tells the end of this story when he talked to you and sort of challenged you to take the part. Maybe maybe this may be apocryphal, but this is what he said. He said, and this goes to what a good what a good interrogator Ali is. He said, the most important thing is you got to research, but you got to understand everything about the person, do as much research as possible. So he found everything on Tahar that he could find, video interviews and print interviews, and that when they were talking, he said to you, I would love it if this was actually not true, but that he said to you, so I've read that you complain about getting offered all these roles to play terrorists, and that bothers you. And that Tahar said, yeah. He said, well, if you don't take this part of someone fighting against terrorism, you can't complain anymore. He said that to you. He said to me that he said, you remember this? He told me to get up. And so it's just sort of laying down the gauntlet for to take the part.
That made up your mind for you, I guess.
Yeah, that was it.
And the 10 episodes lead to the attack, which will be in the finale. When you're filming this show in New York, what did that feel like as people found out what the show was being filmed in New York, and what was the reception, I guess, as you were going through?
We had sort of a code. It was called 40 North while we were filming it, because I think we didn't want to attract attention either here or abroad as to what exactly we were doing. We wanted people to react to the actual show and not to this idea of what we might or might not be filming. This is a small answer to your question, but I know that this story for the Ali Soufan character, the person, and the character that Tahar is playing, is they're not exactly the same thing. Tahar's interpretation of that is not exactly the person, but the story of a Muslim American trying to rescue his religion from those people who were trying to hijack it, and becoming through the course of the season more devotional, more attached to and emotionally attached to his religion, was something that I think a lot of folks who of Muslim background, both on the terrorist side as well as playing not General Kamish, Ali Suleiman, felt like that was important. It was important to be a part of that storytelling. And would you agree with that? That was
totally, yeah. Yeah, because when these type of craziness happen, people are talking about it, and you need to talk with them and make them understand that Islam is different. So the more you talk with them, the more you go and you make your research, and the more you understand faith. So the closest you get to your faith. And I think it was an interesting arc. And at the end, you have the two type of, I don't know how to say that, but they are facing each other, and you have one who understood and the other one who doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's a good
he's talking
encounter.
about in the last episode, when Ali is interrogating a jihadi who's one of bin Laden's bodyguards, who is a misunderstanding of his own faith. He doesn't. This is the true story. He really are not familiar with the Quran. He's familiar with sayings of the Prophet, some of which are totally bogus and unauthenticated. But Ali knows the Quran, and he's able to say that's not Islam. And there's no defense. This guy's been enclosed in a jihadi mindset where, rumors about the religion are preached. And it is a total distortion of what the religion really is. And I think it's beautifully expressed in that scene.
Can you talk about the title, The Looming Tower, and what it is in reference to?
When I was doing my research, there was a lawsuit or criminal case in Germany, and it had been inside one of the pleadings. They had enclosed a letter from bin Laden to the hijackers, and in there he 3 times makes reference to a passage in the Quran, and it says, "Death will find you even in the looming tower." And I thought it must be a signal to him, to the hijackers. And it was such a resonant statement because they were aiming at the towers from the very start. And so that's where it came from.
I mean, to all of you, is there a responsibility that you feel being a part of this? And also to Jeff playing John, who is a character that many people watching will have known in real life?
Many won't, some will. The critics for me are Ali Soufan and the people who worked with John. They're the critics that matter to me. And apparently I did all right. So, but there is a responsibility to them that I felt and wanted to do it in a way that not only they supported me in research, but also at the end of it said, yeah, you did it. That's a responsibility.
I mean, it's amazing to think that there's an entire generation of thinking people that don't remember 9/11, right? I mean, enough time has passed that there's some, you know. And I remember the first time I ever told my daughter about 9/11. We were on the George Washington Bridge, and it was, you know, they have the lights that go up into the sky, and she was like, "Oh, look at that! That's so pretty." And I, you know, she was 9 years old. And I said, "Well, this is the story." So I do think that instead of it just being this time that we associate with grief, it could be a time that we learn something from, and it would be great for that generation to be part of that.
I think for us, you know, those of us who lived through it, every great tragedy becomes in some ways hallowed. And it's difficult to approach because there's, you know, surrounded by this sense of, you know, it's sacred and untouchable. And time has to pass before you can address it more honestly and more candidly. And honestly, we were all in such pain after 9/11, and that wound still hasn't healed. And you know, Ali was talking to me the other day, and he said, you know, this 9/11 is an unresolved chapter in the American psyche, and you can't resolve it without understanding. And that's what we're hoping that this series will do.
Yeah.
My last question to you all, if you had to switch careers, would you go into politics or into the FBI or the CIA?
I would love to go into politics as John O'Neill and start turning over tables and clearing desks. That's what I'd like to. I'd like to see a politician start doing that and see if it did something.
I've thought about going into politics because I'm very stirred up, but one time I did run for public office. It was a neighborhood, president of our neighborhood association in Atlanta where we lived, and so we had a meeting and I offered my candidacy, and they said, you know, what's Roberta up to, my wife? And she was visiting her mother out of town, and so she called that night and said, well, how'd the election come out? And she said, and I said, well, you won. I don't want to be president of the neighborhood association, but I realized that my gift was not perhaps political.
I would love to be head of the EPA. I'd love to take over.
I'd like you to be the head
Yeah,
of the
that's right.
I've always been fascinated by history. Growing up, I felt like the weirdo who took books about Nazi Germany on family vacations. And my parents were like, you're bringing how many what? But I was fascinated because I was trying to wrap my head around how that happened. And I feel like there's like a piece of me that feels like if I was to fit into any of those three places, it would be the CIA. I feel like I have like that piece of my brain. In one of our first meetings, I was just absolutely geeking out about your book and Steve's book. I actually felt like at one point, like looking at you and Craig and Alex, I was like, you need to stop talking. Stop talking. Stop talking. Yeah.
Steve's book is Steve Call.
Oh, yes. I'm
Ghost
talking
Force.
like I know him.
Yeah.
Tahar, what about you?
I don't know. I would work for the NASA.
For NASA?
NASA, yeah.
As an astronaut?
Yeah, why not? If it's, I mean, it's unreal, it's a dream, I would be there.
Wow.
You want to go to Mars?
Yeah.
Elon Musk will take
You
it.
went there?
No, thanks.
Let me know how it is.
I'll send you a text. I'll have a house there. And
Yes.
Okay, Dan, close us out.
I'd like to go into French politics.
French politics. Why?
That was
Why?
an option.
You know, had I known that 20 years ago.
You would be Macron.
I just have to learn French first.
Yeah.
That'll be fine.
Okay.
I would have
I'll
said
teach you.
Danish politics.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, guys. And everyone can watch The Looming Tower on Hulu.